We're talking to Dr. KSanford from Tennessee State University, and the issue is Hurricane Katrena. Dr. Sanford, before we had our first commercial break, we promised that we'd give you an opportunity to talk about the aftermath of Katrena. And of course, as you've already indicated, that hurricane was more than a year ago, and by now we've had an opportunity to make some assessments in reference to it. And so that's essentially what we'd like to try to do today, to see what other folks are saying about it and where this fits into what has happened. Let's start with that.
Of course, as we know to date, the data is strongly indicating that close to 2,000 deaths came as a result of Hurricane Katrena. And I think one of the interesting aspects of it is that it was the next day after the hurricane had ended that the levee broke. And then the water started to come into that bowl type of a territory that then continued to rise and rise and rise. And so when we look back on it historically, our government really knew that that levee would only withstand a 3 to a maximum 4. They knew it may even break with a 3 or a 4. And this was determined to be a level 5. So you think about the extent to which were we prepared to go in, not only with a strategic plan, but how to go about executing it to save people. Close to 127,000 people in the New Orleans area were without transportation. In other words, did not own a vehicle so that they could just get in their cars and get out.
127,000.
127,000 people. So they were at the whelm of need of someone to come in and help. And as we know now, it failed. FEMA did not do an excellent job of getting in and executing the strategic plan. And so many people have lost their lives. And also, after that, many people had to become relocated as a result of this devastating disaster. And they've had to move all over. Here in the state of Tennessee, we have a large number, and throughout the United States, people have had to relocate. Many variables have caused them not to be able to return even today, many of them. But I think our government knew that this particular levee needed engineering technology to go in to bring it up to date and to make it strong enough to withhold a 5 level of disaster. And it was ignored. So a lot of people have lost their lives, and I think people around the world, very similar to the civil rights movement, saw how we failed again to go in to help those who are in need, particularly those who are in poverty, and mostly African American and European American were impacted by this, but I think disproportionately African American because that 9th ward was filled with that. I would also like to say that I've done research in this area and doing interviews with many of the students who have family members in that area, and you found 4 and 5 generations of people living in that area of that 9th ward. Strong, close-knitted type of a families, and they were very devastated as a result of that. And there's a lot of stress, a lot of depression. So although we are a year later, many people are still dealing with the issues of depression and the loss of that type of a close-knitted environment that is no longer there.
You know, you mentioned that you've done a number of interviews, and I think that one of the policies was to sort of distribute some of the college students throughout the various schools and whatever. And a number did come to Tennessee. As a matter of fact, you probably saw some of them at Tennessee State University during that process. What are they saying in reference to some of the, what kind of information are they giving?
Absolutely, and some were indeed in my classroom, and they were relocated to different institutions of higher learning throughout the United States, and Tennessee State University brought in a number of them. They felt that this was, in my interviewing with them, was a part of racism, that our government knew and had been told that the levee needed to be repaired and strengthened so they could withstand a 5 level of a disaster. Many of them felt that it failed, secondly, to come in to help people. They gave the imagery of people in lower income areas, in senior citizens' home, in hospitals, those who were handicapped, just sitting there. If you have an image of someone in a wheelchair just lined up waiting for the bus to come to help them, as the water continued to rise and rise and rise to the point of devastation. So they talked about this, and they talked about how their families are presently split up. You know, maybe the mothers and fathers might be one place, cousins another place, how their brothers who were in the school are no longer there and have to be relocated and can't go back because the school systems are still not intact. So there are a lot of structural problems that came about as a result of this. And so those problems still exist 1 year later.
As a matter of fact, those seem to be somewhat of generational problems, which is to say that individuals in this generation will be impacted by that, and certainly their children will certainly be impacted by this event, and so it's a real problem.
It's a real problem, and there have also been some, if you might use the term, conspiracy theories that maybe this was targeted to remove people from that particular area because it is so close to the French quarters, and if people don't return to that particular area, there's this hypothesis that you might find the levee being rebuilt to a high level, that it can take a 5-level plus, and they're going to upscale the homes and then sell it to those who can afford to live in there that's near that French quarters. And so people would have, again, been disenfranchised, discriminated against because they are low income.
And it seems that it's quite difficult now to think in terms of the kind of cleanup that's going on now in order to help those individuals who've been displaced. It's very, very slow, and so you seem to think that there's a theory that perhaps they wanted to, that was a displacement kind of activity with the intentions of using the land that has been, well, of course, that would not be unusual, unheard of in Western civilization, whatever. But and so this is a real disaster in terms of, well, now what do we do beyond Katrina? I mean, how do we try to at least keep such from happening again or be better prepared for it?
Well, I think there should be some lessons learned, but I think those same lessons that should be learned now should have been very preventable before this came about. So if we could, if our government would just take notice of this, would have learned something from it, how when there's prerequisites for such a disaster, that they would have all of the strategic plan in place, but also prepared to actually carry it out and to be effective in their carrying it out to help people. I think that could be something that could be beneficial in the future.
And you mentioned that there were at least 120,000 folks in that area who had no, well, I guess they depended upon public transportation or no transportation at all. And so it would have been almost impossible for them to be able to move beyond that, and of course there ought to be some kind of strategic plan now that would take that into consideration. Is that what we're saying here?
Yeah, that's what we're saying here, but and I also think what I'm trying to say very clearly and precisely is that our government knew that. I mean, we have the wherewithal, the wealth, the power, and the mechanisms in place to have help in this particular situation, even if it was just school buses lined up to help people out.
Okay, and of course we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break, and we'll continue this.
Thank you.
Guest is Dr.